Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session for Jamaica. We are extremely pleased to have with us Nicola Russell. She's a manager in the Development Bank of Jamaica. Nicola has been there for 13 years, has had a lot of experience with PPP, but even from before that, she was working also for the Ministry of Finance, I believe, in Jamaica, and has worked on privatization and PPP in the energy sector, in the transport sector, and agriculture. She is currently involved with projects that have to do with water and wastewater and other sectors as well. She has an MBA in finance, and we are really delighted to have you, Nicola. The floor is yours to tell us what's going on in Jamaica in the field of PPP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ziad, and thanks for inviting me to this conference. As Ziad indicated, I'm a manager in the PPP and Privatization division here at DBGA. So I'll be presenting on the program and introducing you to some of the opportunities that we have. I'll just share the presentation now. Okay, Jamaica's PPP unit. I'll just give you some quick facts about Jamaica. So Jamaica is the largest English-speaking country in the Caribbean region, where an open and transparent investment regime. We have a stable and supportive democratic government. We have an educated and trained workforce of approximately 1.3 million people. So there's approximately like 2 million people in Jamaica. We have a robust telecommunications infrastructure, strong road infrastructure across the island, double taxation treaties, no foreign exchange controls, zero restriction on foreign ownership. Jamaica's PPP and privatization program, I'll just speak a little bit about the transactions that we've done and the policies. So the PPP policy was approved and published in October 2012, and we updated it in 2017. We're actually making some further amendments to it, but we're awaiting cabinet approval, and I'll speak to those later. We have completed 6 PPP transactions, that's Jamaica. So it would be the Norman Manley International Airport, that's the airport in Kingston. The Kingston Container Terminal, that's also at the port. North-South Highway and Highway 2000, those are 2 separate highway stretches on the island. One connects, as it says, the north to the south, and another one is on the south coast. The Sangster International Airport, that's the one in Montego Bay. That one was done in early 2000. And the School Solar Energy and Efficiency PPP, that one we had commercial close in March. So we have 11 PPP transactions in progress in different sectors in water and wastewater, solid waste management, correctional services, judicial infrastructure, transport, and logistics. In terms of the privatization, because prior to us taking on the role of being the PPP unit, we were actually doing privatizations, and we continue to do privatizations, and they actually are more than, 21. There are about 21 transactions in progress. So you can see that we do more privatizations than we do PPPs, and also in these sectors. So we completed 26 privatizations between 2009 and March 2022 in sectors including energy, tourism, logistics, agriculture, transport, real estate, and housing. And you see, I have a picture here of Wigtown Wind Farm. We actually did this privatization via listing on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. It was oversubscribed, and it was 100% of the shareholding that the government had in that company that we sold on the stock exchange. So we really were able to have locals take up the ownership in that entity. We have 25 privatizations in progress, again, in transport, energy, real estate, manufacturing, tourism, and agriculture. So the transactions are at various stages. We're using several modalities. So PPP for us is just another modality of private sector engagement. We do sales to strategic investors. We do stock exchange listings as well. So in terms of the program, the investment value of the PPP and privatizations transactions completed value over US 2.1 billion, and that's the transactions completed from 2009 to present. And in terms of Jamaica's ranking in InfraScope, as at 2019, we ranked 4th. So you can see, as we had established the policy in 2012, we have progressed significantly in the ranking. And InfraScope ranks 21 Latin America and Caribbean countries based on facilitation of private investment in infrastructure. A little bit about the PPP and privatization program objectives. The first one is to facilitate ownership as well. Increased efficiency in privatized operations. It's frozen. From when? It's back. Okay. All right. Somebody just told me that it froze, but I'm back. All right. And number 4, we support the government's fiscal or debt management program. And then, of course, we monetize non-core assets so that the government can focus on its core activities. A little bit about the PPP legal framework. So as I indicated before, the government of Jamaica's PPP policy was approved and published in October 2012, and it was updated in December 2017. So there is no PPP law. We operate under a policy, and actually the PPP policy is an addendum to the government's privatization policy. So all public investment projects are governed by the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act and the Financial Administration and Audit Act. So PPPs are treated as public investment projects and are subject to the Public Investment Management System. So the PIMS, as we call it, is the common framework for the preparation, appraisal, approval, and management of all public investments in Jamaica, irrespective of the source of funding or procurement and implementation modalities. And I'll explain a little bit about how we had to integrate the PIMS process into the policy. And that was primarily why we had amended the policy in December 2017. We have the Public Procurement Act 2015, where PPPs now require an exclusion order under same, because traditional procurements of goods, works, and services fall under the Public Procurement Act, and the PPPs would require an exclusion. There used to be a general exclusion order for PPPs under this act, but given the promulgation of the new act, it now requires each PPP to seek an exclusion order. However, the transactions that were in train prior to the new legislation coming into effect, we were able to continue doing same under the general exclusion order. We're trying to develop standardized clauses in concession agreements. We currently don't have standard tender documents, standard RFPs, standard concession agreements. What has happened over the years is that each transaction would develop the concession agreement. So you'd have the two airports having concession agreements that are tailored to those transactions, the port, and then of course the road projects and the school solar project. So we're trying to develop standardized clauses so that in each concession agreement, the government's position is clear on specific areas. A little bit about the institutional framework. So at the strategic level, we have cabinet and we have a privatization committee of cabinet. And then what we have is the Public Investment Management Committee, which is a subcommittee of cabinet, which is chaired by the Minister of Finance. And all public investment projects would go to that committee, which includes PPPs. Just to say that the Privatization Committee of Cabinet, even though it's in here at the strategic level, it's not currently active. So all projects actually just go straight to cabinet. DBGA's PPP and Privatization Unit, we refer to it as P4. We manage the PPP and privatization transactions at the operational level. We work with the Attorney General's Chambers. You see it here, AGC. We also work with the Ministry of Finance, PPP Unit, Public Enterprises Division, and the Public managers and secretariat to the enterprise team. We also have project teams that fall under the enterprise team. The project teams would include DBGA and the owning ministry or agency rep, as well as consultants engaged for the transaction. So the project team does the day-to-day work of for the transaction. And then of course you have, once the PPP has reached commercial and financial close, and you have the contract management team, which would be the owning agency, the grantor who has signed the concession agreement, and the whatever consultants that they've engaged. DBGA just operates at a strategic level for contract management. We expect and we include the owning agency in all of the preparations so that they're prepared to take over as the contract manager once the concession is signed. So that's where you have Airports Authority having direct responsibility for managing the contract with the consultants. Similarly to the Port Authority has direct responsibility for managing the Kingston Container Terminal Port concession, which they have done very well. All right, at the institutional framework, I'll just explain again what Cabinet does. They provide overall strategic program oversight. They authorize privatization of assets. They approve policy recommendations or amendments. So when we have amendments to the policies, we would have to send it through the Cabinet submission process to Cabinet for approval. They approve transaction structures. So we're not going to go out with a PPP without having Cabinet approve the transaction. They approve the final terms of agreements. So even after we've selected the concessionaire, we've negotiated the concession agreement, we send it back to Cabinet so they can authorize and approve the final terms before it's signed. They approve selection of the preferred bidder or investor. So once we've done the tender process, we've selected a preferred bidder, Cabinet approval is required. They authorize actions to be taken in relation to the management or monitoring of privatized entities. And then I spoke about the Public Investment Management Committee, which is part of the PIMS process and chaired by the Minister of Finance. They authorize the PPP project development. They approve or endorse the business case. So essentially, at the concept stage, the project proposal is submitted by the ministry, department, or agency to the Public Investment Appraisal Branch, and they would assess it and provide it to the PIMC for approval to develop the business case. And once the business case is completed, the ministry, department, or agency that's promoting the project would have to send the business case back through the Public Investment Appraisal Branch to PIMC for approval to go to the transaction stage, because it has to be programmed into the public sector investment program. They plan for how the government's fiscal resources are allocated. A little bit about the DBGA and Ministry of Finance PPP unit. So in 2012, when the policies were developed, there was a consultancy that looked at where the PPP unit should be housed. And when they did the consultations, yes, the Ministry of Finance was a good fit, but DBGA also, because of our experience in doing privatizations, was also a good fit. And so the recommendation was that we would have two units, one at DBGA and one at Ministry of Finance. But the DBGA PPP unit is the lead implementing agency of the GOJ's PPP and privatization program. So we assess PPPs for viability and marketability, and Ministry of Finance is looking at fiscal and value for money assessments of PPPs. So we work together. A little bit more about what DBGA does. So DBGA does transaction management and project development. So basically we work with the ministries, departments, and agencies in undertaking their PPPs. We assist them with making sure that the business case is undertaken. We engage advisory support, the consultants. We help with them monitoring the consultants. We conduct the tender process on their behalf to engage with the private party. We assist them with negotiations and ultimately getting all of the approvals to commercial and financial close. So we manage that entire process with them and the enterprise teams. So this is a little bit about what else we do. We do program monitoring and evaluation. So we have strategic oversight and post-transaction assessments, and we do evaluation of program developments. We do capacity building and policy development. So we update the policies, manuals, standard operating procedures. So this year, we actually had a consultant come in under the Foundations for Competitiveness and Growth project. That's a World Bank funded project operated and administered by the Planning Institute of Jamaica. And they assisted us with finalizing our standard operating procedures for PPP and privatization. In terms of capacity building, we do conferences and trainings. We recently participated in the last 2 years in doing the APMG course, along with other MDAs who are doing PPPs. That's level 1 and level 2, and we plan to go on to level 3. And we've gotten assistance from IDB for this, and they've really been instrumental in helping us with the capacity building and the policy development. Identification, management of funding for project preparation. So in order to have sustainability and program agency and program sustainability, we needed dedicated resources for project preparation. So there was the project preparation fund that we have under the Foundations for Competitiveness and Growth project, that World Bank funded project that PIOJ administers. We engaged several consultants over the last few years under that. Owning ministries and agencies also use their own resources to fund consultancies. And we're working on other project preparation facilities so that we can have funds available to engage consultants, because it has been an issue in the past where you have these projects that have been conceptualized by MDAs, and then there has been an issue with where do we get the funds to get the consultants to do the business case, to do all the feasibility assessments, so that we can go back and get the approvals that we need from Ministry of Finance, Cabinet, etc. A little bit about the enterprise teams. They recommend appropriate strategies and frameworks for the transactions. They clarify the objectives and modalities. They are responsible for also reviewing the consultants' reports along with us and make the necessary recommendations. They recommend specific evaluation criteria and weightings for selection of investment proposals, review due diligence reports, review preferred proposals or investors to cabinet, or recommend, and negotiate and or recommend the final terms. So it's really a strategic team. We do the day-to-day work, but they provide the strategic support. The Ministry of Finance and the Public Investment Appraisal Branch. As I indicated before, all PPPs have to go through the PIMS, and the Public Investment Appraisal Branch is their first point of contact. So DBGA would be a part of the review process of any PPP that goes through the Public Investment Appraisal Branch. So Ministry of Finance overall, as I indicated, they have a PPP unit that focuses on the fiscal and value for money assessments. You have this Public Investment Appraisal Branch as well. So their responsibility really relates to monitoring, classifying and rationalizing public enterprises. Well, that's privatization. Manages the overall fiscal risk of the PPP and privatization transaction, ensure value for money analysis are conducted, and ensures fiscal commitments are appropriately budgeted for and reported on, oversees debt management priorities, because we do have a lot of debt, and there are targets that need to be achieved, and we're reminded on several occasions as it relates to whether or not a project can go forward is really dependent on the fiscal space. And so we have to be very mindful of, whether we do, government pays PPPs or user pays PPPs. And they comment on all cabinet submissions, and they review public investments and recommend the appropriate modality. The ministries, departments, and agencies are responsible for proper asset management. They proactively identify projects within their portfolio. So a lot of the ministries, departments, and agencies are already working on infrastructure projects that they want to do, and they're just looking for the best way to implement it. A lot of it is done via traditional procurement, but now we're seeing them looking at PPPs, and I'll speak more to those. They appoint suitable staff, resources for inclusion on the enterprise and project teams, timely provision of information for due diligence, assist in the bidding process, due diligence evaluation, contract implementation, management, and monitoring. So they are responsible for monitoring the concessionaires. The Attorney General's Chambers plays a key role for us through the entire project development process. They provide legal reviews, opinions on transaction matters or issues. Yes, we do hire external attorneys for most, if not all, of the transactions that we work on, but the Attorney General's Chambers must review all of the legal agreements, all of the documentation to ensure that it is in alignment with the government's positions on matters and the legislations, etc. They review the transaction agreements, contracts, and all legal documents. So the government is not going to sign any agreements without the AGC's review. Yes, the external attorneys may have prepared the drafts, and we have negotiations and it's finalized, but it's really not final until the AGC reviews it and it goes to cabinet for approval. So they provide advice at all approval stages. So they're on the team. They provide that support. They provide support during the bidding and evaluation process. So if we have any issues, we can refer the matter to them for advice. They facilitate or participate in the negotiation process, and they comment on all cabinet submissions, and they review and approve the due execution of legal documentation by the government. So in summary, this is the process that we have. Identification and screening. The MDA submits the candidate projects to the Public Investment Appraisal Branch. We are part of that review process where we screen to see if this PPP would be suitable, and then it's approved at PIMC as a concept. Then it goes for development for the business case. The MDA prepares a business case. They would have engaged DBGA as transaction managers. We would get the necessary advisory support. So once all of that feasibility assessments are done, then it's evaluated against the criteria. It's sent back to PIAB. And it was reviewed by DBGA, Ministry of Finance, AGC, and then it would go to cabinet for approval, PIMC and cabinet. And then in the bidding process, The consultants, DBGA, would assist the MDA in preparing the necessary tender documents. Usually for the PPPs, we do a pre-qualification process, followed by the RFP, and then we issue the RFP and evaluate the bids. So once you have a preferred bidder and the terms are approved, then you have the cabinet approval, and then you have commercial and then financial close. And as I indicated before, contract management, we have established a contract management team with the MDA leading. We'd established the processes, and they're there to monitor the delivery and manage the contract throughout the life. We operate at a strategic level to check in with the MDA, periodically get reports from them as to what is happening in terms of the obligations being fulfilled by the concessionaire, but it is the MDA's responsibility to monitor. There was a question asked in terms of on this template slide about what actions are you taking to address climate change in PPPs. And as was in a prior forum panel discussion, we've been working with IDB and the consultants that they engaged, and they produced a climate resilient public-private partnership toolkit. And this is very timely because Jamaica continues to face many risks related to climate change. So it raises the need for to prepare for a future where adverse natural hazards are more frequent and severe. I mean, we're already used to having hurricanes, and some of them can be quite severe, and we are already used to those. But you know, there could be other adverse natural hazards that will occur in the future. And so the DBGA, with the support of IDB and a consultancy firm, developed this toolkit. And they launched the toolkit in 2020. And it as it says here, it provides professionals with practical solutions to integrate the assessment of climate risks and resiliency opportunities in the preparation of infrastructure projects through PPPs. And then following the toolkit, we had asked them to assist us with making amendments to our PPP policy to include these climate resiliency considerations. So we have completed all the amendments, and we've actually sent it forward to our parent ministry for them to send it to cabinet for approval. So once it's approved, we will be publishing a revised, updated PPP policy to include the climate resiliency considerations. And we're going to take it a step further to have a pilot project implemented utilizing the recommendations coming out of the toolkit. So we're trying to identify a pilot project that could be used from the existing pipeline of projects. Contractual adjustment mechanisms. So we were also given a slide on force majeure. So I just like to say that all the existing PPP agreements, it's not many, but all the existing PPP agreements have force majeure provisions contained in same. Force majeure generally speaks to, of course, any unforeseeable, unpreventable event or circumstances that directly affects Jamaica and the obligations of the concessionaire under the agreement. And the factors that will result in force majeure event include, but are not limited to, war, epidemic, plague, earthquake, tsunami, things like that. So generally, when a force majeure event occurs, the concessionaire is entitled to some form of relief from its obligations, provided it has followed the processes set out in the agreement. So as I indicated before, we don't have a standard concession agreement. So there are concession agreements were tailored for each transaction, but generally speaking, the force majeure provisions have these relief provisions, and that a prolonged force majeure event, it was different in each agreement. So some was 6 months, others up to 11 months. And termination was under a prolonged force majeure will result in a concessionaire receiving termination payments from the owner or grantor. So the main sectors in the PPP pipeline currently, so there are transport, social infrastructure, water and sanitation. So In prior years, it was mainly transport, as you can see, and energy. But for transport now, we're looking at 2 aerodromes, one at Vernon Field and another one on the south coast. And we're also looking at another highway expansion. So these are at the concept stage. This is the North Coast Highway expansion. That's a brownfield PPP. Social infrastructure, again, at the concept level, we're looking at Ministry of Justice wanting to do 3 judicial court complexes. And they approached us last year about it, and we've been in discussions with them about getting, having to do the business case, and we've been assisting them in that regard. And then the Ministry of National Security is looking at doing a new correctional facility via PPP, and they're in the process of getting the pre-feasibility study done now. For water and sanitation, we work with the National Water Commission and the Rio Cobra Water Treatment Plant. That's for the Kingston and St. Andrew area. Integrated Solid Waste Management PPP. We work with the National Solid Waste Management Authority. NWC, again, National Water Commission, has an island-wide non-revenue water reduction program. And NWC, again, Soapberry Wastewater Treatment Plant that serves the Kingston metropolitan region. So a little bit about some of the recent PPPs that were done. I indicated the airport in Kingston was done recently, that we had financial close in October 2019. So that's Norman Manley International Airport. So it's a 25-year concession to develop, operate, and maintain Jamaica's second largest international airport. The largest one is in Montego Bay. Objectives were to enhance the competitive positioning of NMIA, increase the service quality standards, and improving operational efficiency, and leveraging private sector investment to improve facilities and operations, monetizing the assets' optimal value. So the commercial close was actually October 2018, and financial close October 2019, and the capex is 110 million. The concessionaire is PAC Kingston Airports Limited, owned by Grupo Aeropuerto del Pacifico. In March 2022, we had commercial close of the School Solar Energy and Efficiency PPP. So private sector provider, that's Roswell Institutional Sustainable Energy Limited, will undertake the financing, installation, and maintenance of photovoltaic generation and energy efficient systems in a pilot project of 30 select secondary schools. This is a 15-year energy savings performance contract. Yes, it's only $5 million, but it's a pilot project. So, once we see the results, then it could be rolled out to more schools. There is, under ongoing procurements, we are finalizing the Rio Cobra water treatment plant negotiations with the concession preferred investor. So they have been to implement a 15 million gallons per day water treatment plant along the Rio Cobra to augment the water supply for the Kingston metropolitan area. So we're just awaiting final approvals for commercial close, and that's the capex for that is about 60 million. All right, so we're also working on, and this is in the business case stage, the integrated solid waste management project. So this would be an integrated solid waste management system for the island that incorporates a waste to energy component while reducing the country's reliance on landfills. They would separate the regulatory and operational functions of solid waste management and the relocation and rehabilitation of the Riverton landfill facility. So when I speak about this this Riverton landfill facility, it's in Kingston, but as the city has expanded, the location of the landfill has become an issue, especially when there are fires. So relocating it is something that's a part of this, as well as this waste to energy component. The waste characterization study and siting study were completed, and the business case and the transaction structure are in progress. We're not going to disclose the investment value right now because we're still working on the business case, but we expect the business case to be completed by the end of Q2 22-23. In terms of the island-wide non-revenue water reduction program. Okay, so the NRW levels are between 70 and 80%. This is water that is produced into the system is either lost, either due to, technical issues, the system losses because of old infrastructure, or theft. So we want to move the NRW targets from approximately 75% to 30%. This would be a 15-year agreement. The capex for the entire island is around 300 million, and it's a performance-based contract. So again, this is a National Water Commission project, NWC major transmission or distribution network. So the business case was completed and the relevant approvals are being sought. I already spoke to you about the process, PIMC and cabinet approval required. And then, of course, after that, once they get the approvals, then structuring and preparations. Oh.
Seems like Nicola is having connection problems. Hopefully she's back.
Is it back?
Nicola,
okay.
We're back. But we're running
okay.
4 minutes to go.
Okay, I think I just have a few more slides. And then we have the business case being prepared for that. I'll just quickly speak about the correctional facility. So the Ministry of National Security wants to construct a new state-of-the-art 3,500 bed maximum security correctional facility to replace the existing facility in Kingston. So it aims to eradicate overcrowding in correctional facilities and reduce the recidivism rate. So a pre-feasibility assessment is being undertaken to determine the suitability for PPP development. Just a little bit about climate and resilience infrastructure concerns. So when we look at it, we are thinking that the capacity within government to understand climate risks and its impact on infrastructure and how to properly mitigate the risks is a concern, because this is something that we have to be having, discussions about as to how we're going to practically deal with it. Additional costs in project preparation and development costs for PPPs, including disaster risk insurance, because ultimately the government's going to have to pay for this, additional preparation. Grantor and private parties need to understand the long-term benefits of adopting climate resilient infrastructure. On the way forward, amendments are being made to the GOJ's PPP policy to incorporate climate resiliency concerns. The Ministry of Finance separately is developing a disaster risk policy. However, that policy does not include PPPs. Therefore, DBGA has proposed amendments to the PPP policy related to disaster risk insurance to facilitate the improvement in the management of contingent liabilities generated by the impact of natural disasters on infrastructure PPPs, subject to cabinet approval. Other things could be that you include climate resilience requirements in technical provisions in tender documents, as well as when you're preparing the PPP business case. We could explore concessional financing for projects incorporating climate risk mitigation measures and sustainable infrastructure.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think that's it. So I will stop sharing.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Unfortunately, we have 2 minutes because we need to allow people to be able to go to the Dominican Republic presentation.
Right, sorry. Yeah.
All right, we have questions related to project preparation, to value for money, to the IDB, the toolkit for that you worked on with them for climate resilient PPPs. Unfortunately, there is no time to answer those questions now, but your presentation has been shared with us, I believe.
Yes, I emailed it, yeah.
And does it have your email address on it, or so people can contact you?
Oh, no, I don't think I put the website or DBGA or my email address, but I can resend it here with it in it, yes. So that any questions about the program, you can direct it to me, or I can put another email as well so that you can have persons contact us directly. Yes.
If you don't mind doing that, that'd be great. That way people can get their questions answered. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Quite informative presentation with all the structure and how it works. That was very, very helpful. Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll have you again with us in a future WAPP event. And everybody...
Thank you. And any one of my team members as well, our general manager, Denise, and we have 3 other managers in the unit. Any one of us can be a part of your conference. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, wonderful. So everybody's now invited to join the Dominican Republic session. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Okay, bye.